Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman-Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unseen Paranormal. I am your host as usual, Eric Freeman-Sims. Thank you for joining us today. And today we have a great guest for you. We welcome back Warren Aguis. He is the author of Evidence of Extraterrestrials, Over 40 Cases to Prove that Aliens Have Visited Earth. And today we welcome him back to chat about the recent disclosure and all the government stuff that is going on with UAPs and UFOs and aliens and all that good extraterrestrial stuff. And try to make some sense of out of all this and have him explain to us what's really going on. We also kind of, toward the end, get into a little ancient alien stuff because he's from Malta and there's some of that ancient alien giant weirdness going on over in Malta. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. And one little quick thing of housekeeping. If you haven't checked it out yet, go check out Strange Chapters, our new podcast where I narrate different nonfiction stories from true crime authors to paranormal authors to everything weird, strange, macabre, all that good stuff. You can find it anywhere you're listening to this show right now and also over on YouTube. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our YouTube page and both pages for the Unseen Paranormal and for Strange Chapters. And also join us over on the Facebooks in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group. And we've got about almost 900 people in there now. So come join us for that, for some good chats on the paranormal and to see what's coming up on the show next. Y'all enjoy this episode with Mr. Warren Aguis. We'll see you next time. Hey, Warren, thanks for coming back on the show and joining us to talk about UFOs, UAPs, and all that good stuff again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, my pleasure. And you're the only person I want to talk to because we had such a good conversation last time about your book, and I love how you approach the subject through like a scientific point. So I just think you're the perfect person to talk to. And so today, just let the audience know, we're going to talk about all the stuff. Basically, we were just talking that your book ended kind of in 2017.
Yeah.
And you could write a whole nother book with everything that's going on. So if we want to pick up there, because you stopped with ATIP, and now we have Lou Elizondo and all these other people coming forward from ATIP, and they've got another organization now, and a bunch of things have changed.
So much has changed, and I think we're at the point where the Department of Defense, the DOD, has formally acknowledged the existence of UFOs. And as I was saying before we started recording, it's not a matter of whether UFOs exist anymore. I do think that the definition of disclosure is something I've written about so much in my first book. I do think that we have reached that point. Now, what we're looking at is how much is the public going to know? What is the level of transparency that we're going to have? And so many mind-blowing things have come up. And I think that this big wave of disclosure started, I would say, in 2021, really. Well, in 2017 first, when the DOD released the video of the Tic Tac UFO and of Gimbal and of Go Fast. So I do think that that's when the ball started rolling. But with that being said, so much things have happened, especially UFOs have been in the news every other month at this point. In every other point, there was a point where there was around 6 shootdowns in a single month, and I think that sent everyone like on a complete rabbit hole as to what UFOs are and all that.
Yeah, and it's crazy how many of the videos have come out just from that Tic Tac video, and they've released more, and then you have all these United States service members coming out and talking about and telling their stories.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Lou Elizondo has been a huge part of that, coming from ATIP and kind of giving up his career and to give a disclosure to everybody and say, this is what's going on.
Yeah, and I do think that Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, and I do think that those two individuals, you cannot not mention them. If you're going to talk about disclosure and what we know nowadays, you have to mention Lou Elizondo. And for those listeners who are not aware of who Lou Elizondo was, is that he used to work with the Pentagon, but he resigned because of the lack of transparency regarding UAPs. I would be using the term UAPs and UFOs. They mean practically the same thing.
Right.
UAP stands for unidentified aerial phenomena. It's practically UFOs, just without the stigma surrounding the term. But Lou Elizondo certainly set the ball rolling, and I think that if we're going to have the conversation about disclosure, we need to continue off from July of 2022, which was last year, and that's when a new office was set up. The office is called AARO, AARO, which stands for All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. If you want to cut the story short, this office practically investigates UFOs from a defense standpoint. So it doesn't just focus on UAPs, but it focuses on surveillance, on system capabilities, on science and technology. So this office basically investigated UFOs. So AARO picked up where the UAP task force left off. The UAP task force had preceded ATIP. So in July 2022, AARO was set up, and they practically gave a list of things they will be investigating. And since then, Sean Kirkpatrick is someone who's been in the news a lot. He's the director. He's been very vocal about UFOs and their capabilities. Then, after July 2022, the one thing that we certainly have to mention is the whistleblower Dave Grush. He said that he sent shockwaves, essentially. Everyone started talking about him. He's been, the same thing that happened to Bob Lazar has happened to him. He's been ridiculed. He's tried to be disproven, but he has a lot of credibility. And for those listeners who are not aware who Dave Grush is that he used to work, he's very decorated as in the military, and he came forward and stated that he has testified in front of Congress, and he's told Congress about crash retrieval projects. He's stated verbatim that the UAP task force, the office which used to investigate UFOs, it was denied access to a crash retrieval program. Crash retrieval means that a UFO has crashed and it was retrieved. But I think the mind blow, because I think we all knew that was happening, right?
Yeah.
In my book, there's an entire part about crashed UFOs, such as Roswell, the Kecksburg incident. So we knew that there were crashed UFOs, but to have someone say that I was practically left out because of the lack of transparency, and he confessed that there was indeed a cover-up, and UFOs have indeed been retrieved. But to me, that wasn't what was so mind-blowing about this. Like I said, because we knew that to a certain degree. What was so pivotal about this day in June was that he said that non-human biologics, I find that interesting that the choice of words he used were actually non-human biologics, right, were recovered from the crash retrieval. And honestly, that although we knew that as well, like from Roswell, we knew that bodies were recovered, so on and so forth. Still, hearing that from an official person, from someone who was in the know, hearing him say that was certainly so pivotal for disclosure.
Yeah, and he was hired to look into black budgets, right?
Exactly.
That's originally how he got into all the UFO UAP stuff and kind of the cover up.
Yeah, he had a top clearance. He had a clearance, and so the only reason he knows all of this stuff was because he was part of this stuff. He's not, a guy with a tinfoil hat or something. Like he was literally
right.
He was literally part of these projects, and was something that was mind blowing to me is that he also brought the Vatican into the story, and he said that this is a 90-year cover-up. A 90-year cover-up. And the first recovery of a UAP, a crashed UFO, was in Italy in 1933, back in Mussolini's regime, where they retrieved a partially intact vehicle. And he goes on to say that this UFO was secured in an Air Force base, but the Vatican was aware of this retrieval and informed the American government, who obviously then took over. So even other countries apart from the USA are involved in this, I mean, century-long cover-up, essentially. Like I said, we knew that, but hearing that and him having so many specific details, it's something else. It's certainly something else.
Yeah, for sure. And also talking about David Grush, you kind of got to bring in Jeremy Corbell into the mix, because he kind of brought him to the forefront and got him to, start talking about it and kind of set up the behind the scenes, kind of set up the congressional hearings with some of the Congress members.
Exactly. Like I said, we have to mention Corbell and Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp are two individuals who need to be mentioned because they do the heavy lifting stuff, right? I mean, they have a podcast called Weaponize, and they regularly bring out new updates, if you will, about UAP. And they set up a lot of the congressional hearings, which we will talk about shortly. Corbell, for those listeners who are not aware, he directed the fantastic documentary about Bob Lazar. And the one thing I will say about going back to David Grush is that the things that he said line up with the things that Bob Lazar said back in 1990.
Right.
So I do think that Bob Lazar was vindicated for what he said. Finally, there's been a lot of doubts about Bob Lazar, but a lot of the things that he said line up. So that's fascinating, honestly.
Yeah. And still talking about Lou Elizondo and David Grush. I've heard a lot of people talk about, maybe they're just modern day agents of the government putting out misinformation.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Like, what do you think goes to their credibility that they're not the misinformation agents like we've heard about before?
Yeah. They used to say that Tom DeLonge is also a part of that. But I don't see how that is possible, because they're literally bringing in every possibility. They're not coming out and saying, listen, these are extraterrestrial aircraft. I mean, they're saying that these are UAP, they're unidentified, and they list a number of things that they could be. They don't just say these are certainly ETs. In fact, in the interview David Grush had with Ross Coulthart, he said that these could be coming from other dimensions, not just from other planets. So they're not pushing an agenda that they are ET. And if they are cover-up or agents or misinformation agents, then it's funny how every detail they're saying seems to be corroborated. And they're not just talking facts, they're putting out videos. And even if these UAPs are not ETs, it is still so concerning, because you're telling me that so many UFOs are spotted over military aircraft. That is still worrying, and it still needs to be investigated. And going back a few years, in 2021, the director of national intelligence, they released a report on UAP, and they said that out of the 144 reports, 143 of them, they were unidentified. And people also tend to forget that if you're testifying in front of Congress, it's a criminal offense to actually lie. So this goes beyond being a misinformation agent. I do think that the public nowadays is in a space and in a place where they can handle certain truths. And I think if you ask the majority of people, they will tell you, yes, I do believe in extraterrestrial life. So I don't think that the idea is far-fetched anymore. If they were misinformation agents, I do believe that they would be pushing a particular agenda. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because we're still seeing so much resistance for a full transparency.
Yeah, and the fact that a lot of this was broken by the New York Times article, they're putting their reputation on the line, because in media, the whole UFO thing has been stigmatized and made fun of for many, many years. I think I forget, was it the mayor of Los Angeles came out in like a alien suit one time and made fun of thousands of people seeing a craft, and was acting like he was serious about it, and came out in this ridiculous alien get up. But Yeah, it's nice to see the switch with the media too, to where when you see these things on TV, it's not a big joke. They're actually reporting it seriously, and like the New York Times actually, dove into the story for many years before they ever put it out and made sure that it was correct information and things like that.
Exactly. And when you have reputable reporters, and I do think that this is why it's important to create a new term like UAP. Okay, we're joking that it means the same thing as a UFO, but introducing the term UAP, it's setting sort of a new direction, a new era, if you will, an era where UFOs are not taken as a joke anymore. Granted that they never were, but nowadays we're finally seeing just how complex this issue is. And that is why I try to use UAP in my speaking. But having journalists finally getting on board and reporting it, it is change. Something that it also goes beyond government, right? Because Ross Coulthart, in July of the same year, he came out and said that Lockheed Martin, an aerospace company, a private one, is in possession of UFOs. And that creates a new level of just how important this topic is. Because if a private aerospace company, has in its possession a retrieved aircraft, that's very worrying. That's very worrying because it can be capitalized,
Right. Yeah, and it makes me wonder because I think, especially with American people, I think we still think that stealth bombers and things are like the height of technology.
Yeah.
And, that technology was 20 years old when they finally, unveiled it to the world that we have this stuff. So It's crazy to think that they have these crashed aircrafts, and what kind of technology do we have now that's come out of them?
In fact, there's that quote. I'm not sure who said it, but the technology you're seeing now, that's from 20 years ago. Like it's
right.
not modern at all. And what is worrying now is that there's this possibility of private organizations having this extremely advanced aircraft. I think that creates a new problem. But that is going back to Lou Elizondo and Dave Grush. I do believe that they are 100% legit, and like I said, many people have been vindicated. Bob Lazar has been vindicated for what he has said for so many years. I mean, he was ridiculed, if we compare the backlash that Grush received, it's very similar to what Bob Lazar received. I mean, it's been leaked that Dave Grush was suffering from his mental health, so they started using that against him then, and substance abuse. And these individuals are misinformation agents, or they're just bullshitting, then I find that it's very precise. The things they're saying is still very precise, and it must be a massive coincidence then.
Yeah, and also for somebody like Dave Grush, like you were saying, to put himself out there with the PTSD and things, and yeah, he had some alcohol issues, but that doesn't. I don't think that discredits him. It's not like he's not schizophrenic or bipolar or any kind of major issues like that, to where he's just making things up. And like you said, they've discredited him and tried to ruin his life.
Exactly.
Certain people have because of it. And so who would put themselves out there? He didn't really have anything to gain. He has everything to lose, just like Bob Lazar.
Yeah, and if you look at these people, they haven't gained anything. I mean, look at Bob Lazar and Dave Grush. They're not in the mainstream media. They don't speak publicly about UFOs. For example, Jeremy Corbell, he's very focused on UFOs. So he does his main focus, although he's a fantastic director and he creates fantastic documentaries, he does focus solely on UFOs. But if you look at David Grush or Commander David Fravor, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, whistleblowers and individuals who have come forward with a strong military background, they had no reason to come forward. They had no reason to. They could have just continued with their career. And precisely, why would you lose everything? And when David Grush was asked why did he do this, he said, because I'm a patriot, because I love the country that I served, and the American public deserves to know. And that is precisely it, that there needs to be a higher level of transparency.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that we need to know where our money is going, especially like you were saying with these private companies having this technology,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
could ostensibly they could attack a country on their own as a individual company and not as a country.
Exactly. And that's it. And that Ross Colhart, that's what he was saying, that it is so worrying when you have a company such as Lockheed Martin. If you look at the aircraft that they release, you have the SR-71, the U-2 spy plane. It is aircraft with technology that it's like, how the hell did they create it at the time that it was created, of course. So it
Right.
makes you wonder, this level of advanced technology, where is it coming from? And taxpayer money, where is it going? And does a private aerospace company, should it have a retrieved UFO? The answer is obviously no. It creates a certain level of power that I don't think a company should have with that level of technology, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that, we're, as the American taxpayers, we're giving them billions and billions of dollars, and they don't have to account for any of that money or where it goes.
That's it.
And yeah, and that was part of David Grush's point, and that's kind of why he was brought in to find out where that money's going. Why do you think there's been a shift with like Congress and senators, congressmen and women and senators, like wanting to look into this?
I think because they don't have another choice at this point. When you have so much in the media nowadays, this is what I love about today's day and age, is that nowadays you don't need a platform to release information. That can be very dangerous, of course, for misinformation. But nowadays, if you look at Jeremy Corbell, he just released these videos on his YouTube channel. So when you have so many videos showing worrying aircraft with capabilities, the Pentagon, the DoD, Aero, they have to address it.
Yeah.
For example, the footage released in 2019 by one of the videos Corbell released was over the USS Russell in California, and it was shot by military individuals. So if the public knows that the military is encountering UAPs, it puts a certain concern, sort of what is happening. And I do think that the certain shift in the way that the Congress is handling things is also, it's a way of control, of asserting control. Basically, if they are speaking about it publicly and honestly, it means that they are handling it well. And it may portray that they have some sort of control over the situation. I think it would be much shadier if they weren't talking about it. So I do think that now that they're in a position where they were pushed into a corner, they can't avoid it anymore. They can't, because these individuals will soon come forward. If you look at David Grush, he spoke on an independent platform. He didn't, although he did speak with Congress, he went to the public and he broke the internet with his news. So it's a level of damage control, I believe, but also it's a way of acknowledging that UAPs are very serious. Granted, they always have been serious, but now that you're having individuals and whistleblowers coming forward and speaking publicly, the Pentagon, the DoD doesn't have an option but to address these issues.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about before when you're on the show about, people, especially Americans, we think that, we're just at the forefront of disclosure.
Yeah.
But disclosure is happening in other countries. And there was a documentary that came out not too long ago called Moment of Contact, that was about a series of events in 1996 in Brazil. And the Brazilian government's kind of been pretty transparent about that crash. And
I know the encounter you're saying, but even if you look at, for example, in my book I mentioned the Night of UFOs. There's a chapter called The Night of UFOs, and it speaks about in 1986 there was a lot of UFO sightings, and the following day, the Brazilian Air Force, the Brazilian government came forward and said they issued a press release, they issued a press conference, and they said that these were UFOs. They were not military aircraft. They are UFOs. We don't know what they are, and we're not going to say what they are because we just don't know. So the difference between how other governments approach the topic versus how the US approaches the topic has always been very different. And Americans do believe that they are at the forefront of disclosure. And I mean, speaking in all honesty, they do have a level of power as well. I mean,
Right.
I keep going back to David Grush, but it was a very interesting conversation. I mean, he said that in 1933, Italy retrieved a UFO, but the US then take over. So they do have a certain level of control over, not control, but a level of power. There is a power imbalance, I believe. But it is happening in other countries. Other countries are acknowledging UAPs, the existence of UAPs. But I do believe that the movement, it has been initiated by the US, and I do believe that the US does carry a certain level of power when it comes to disclosure.
Yeah, and with that Moment of Contact film, I find it interesting that you're having more people come out and talk about actually like normal citizens, not military, but actually having contact with alien beings. That the old video of the alien interrogation has come back out, and there's a guy who's dove into it for the past like 20 years and has found the people that participated in the video, and kind of the government discredited that video. If you know what video I'm talking about, where they actually did the alien interrogation. Yeah, and this guy's working on trying to get it all validated and saying that the video is real, and it's kind of an incredible video. But I think it's cool that you have more people coming out like that, the Roswell of Brazil, the Moment of Contact, and things, and this video resurfacing, and people, just normal people diving in and trying to figure out if these things are real.
Exactly, and I do believe that's the idea of having normal people having to do the investigations. I do think that it comes because, I mean, for so many decades, the government didn't acknowledge UFOs at all, or when it did, it just ridiculed the topic. I mean, my entire book, the first, my book, all the encounters I mention in it, I mean, the government, the Air Force always dismissed them as just a misidentification or an air balloon, which means that it was up to the public to find out the real truth. And independent individuals having to carry out investigations. Granted that investigations were being done by the government, but they were just not disclosed. So I do think that regardless of how much information we have nowadays, individuals will still have a certain level of skepticism when it comes to transparency from the government, and they will still carry out their independent research, which is very important. Something I mentioned in my book is that the book is just a presentation of facts. I do not present a strong opinion on what UFOs are in certain UFO cases, and I encourage readers to keep on researching themselves. That is why I referenced every detail I put in, so that individuals are encouraged to keep on researching themselves. And I'm not sure if you've seen the Mexican government with the UFO body they brought out. That was, I mean, it was comical, but this wouldn't have happened years ago, right? It's only because there's been this wave of UFOs, and I mean, they're real, they're not real. That's I doubt they were real. They look extremely fabricated, but I think people are focusing too much on the content rather than the process. I like to look at the process of the situation, which means that, listen, here you have the Mexican government and they are willing to talk about alien bodies because alien bodies have been retrieved from cache retrievals. So the idea of a government being in possession of an alien body is not so absurd.
Yeah. And for everybody listening out there who haven't listened to the first episode that you came on, your book's called Evidence of Extraterrestrials, Over 40 Cases Prove Aliens Have Visited Earth. Yeah. And and they can go back and listen to that episode where we kind of cover the cases and go through all of those. The other thing I kind of wanted to pick your brain about today is the ancient alien stuff, because if I remember correctly, you're from Malta, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's some sites in Malta that I've seen that can't really be explained about how they were built and the technology of the time. So what's your opinion on those type of sites around the world with the kind of ancient alien theory?
Yeah. So when you have, let's say, historical places, in Malta there are a few, and there's a place in Malta where the stones are so big that it's been alleged that it was built by giants. And this also goes back to, for example, how the pyramids were built. How is it possible that individuals man, how is it possible for man to have carried such stones with such precision?
Yeah.
Other entities, non-human entities, have always been here. It's not a matter of they've been here just for, since the 1990s. They've always been here. If we're saying that the UFO phenomenon is real, if we're saying that aliens exist, it means that they always have. And if we're saying that UFOs have visited Earth, we're also saying that they have always visited Earth, which goes back to the times of the pyramids. So with that argument in mind, and if you look at the facts, the ancient alien hypothesis is very plausible because it's also reflected in ancient art. If you look at the Egyptian hieroglyphics, there's a lot of aircraft depicted in them. If you look at some of the religious paintings, some of them, for example, one of the most famous paintings is the Madonna and Child with the Infant Saint John. It's from the 15th century, and you can clearly see a UFO in the background. And of course, it can be, interpreted in different ways. You can say that it was the Holy Spirit or whatever. But the point is that people have always seen strange things in the sky. But something that I must mention and something that blows my mind is the precision of these monuments. If you look at the pyramids, they're built with such precision that how could have mankind built that?
Right.
Even nowadays with the technology that we have, it would still be very impressive if we were able to build them. But we're talking about, ages, decades, centuries ago. And when you keep that in mind, the ancient aliens hypothesis, it's very plausible. And it's not just with the pyramids. If you look at historical monuments around the world, which date back centuries ago, there's always that question: how did mankind build this? Is it possible for just this to have been a natural creation due to erosion or whatever? I think it's all a matter of from which lens you're going to view it. I do believe that I always go off the premise of, if I believe that aliens exist and UFOs exist, then it means that they always have. And if they always have existed, then that means that there have been ancient sightings. And then the idea doesn't become too far-fetched,
Yeah. Yeah. And just looking at, if you just go look up pictures of like Machu Picchu and Göbekli Tepe.
Exactly.
And also a really weird site that I think a lot of people don't know. I think it's in Ethiopia, where they drilled down in the rock to create these amazing chapels and things. And instead of building rock up, they actually carved it down into the rock. And these things are like 5 stories tall and in this solid rock. And it's in perfectly, square walls and things like that. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So it all goes back to that. Like, how could have mankind build that? If they've built it in the past, we certainly haven't built anything like it in recent years. That's for sure.
Yeah, like you were saying, the precision. Some of those blocks at like Machu Picchu and places, the tolerances are so minute that you can't even get a piece of paper in between in the joints.
Exactly. So that is precisely my argument for the ancient aliens hypothesis. And I will once again go back to Dave Grush, but he said that this cover-up, it's not recent. It's at least 90 years. So if the cover-up has been there for 90 years, if it's been happening for 90 years, UFOs have been visiting Earth for much since the beginning of time. The first crash that I am aware of is the Aurora crash, and that happened in the 1800s. That is the first documented one. If you go back in time when there weren't any documents, there weren't any reports, these things still happened. There just wasn't any way for people to know about them.
Yeah, and it seems looking at kind of the modern sightings, it seems like they've become more prevalent, especially seeing craft and things with the advent of like nuclear weapons. It seems like they may have took a even more interest in us and maybe even trying to stop us from, blowing our entire world up.
Exactly, certainly. In fact, the prevalence of UAPs and nuclear missiles, it certainly exists. There's an entire chapter in my book about it, but there have been many reports of UAPs disabling nuclear missiles. There have been many reports of UAPs interacting in some way or another with missiles. And during the Russian war with Ukraine, there were also a few UAP reports that Russian newspapers covered. So that's always been the case, that if there at times of war or in areas where there's a high military activity, UAPs and UFOs are always reported. Ryan Graves and Commander David Fravor, they said that the Tic Tac incident, the UFOs followed them to the military site in the Middle East. A lot of the videos that Jeremy Corbell has been releasing, they've always been captured in military active countries. There's certainly a correlation between the two.
Yeah.
When I bring up this argument, then people start saying, could it be a nuclear missile, or could it be, just drones? And the answer is no. And the reason is that the reason I say it with such confidence is because these footages, they are analyzed. For example, so I don't talk so abstractly, in 2022, so in March of this year, an image was released by Jeremy Corbell, an image of a UAP, and this UAP was taken in Baghdad, an active military zone. And people were asking, could this have been a nuclear missile? And the answer is not. It's not. It couldn't have been, because this was not an isolated event. The UAPs were seen in different shapes and different sizes. And they were tracked on radar as well. And this is just one of them. Then there is the Mosul orb UFO footage that Corbell released once again. It was taken in 2016 in Mosul, Iraq, and you can just see an orb-like UFO. And the UFO in this footage, it's moving with precision, with intent. So there is a clear idea that UFOs are interested in military activity. The one reason for that is that we are not alone in the universe. I mean, if we blow up Earth, it's an ecosystem. Other planets will be influenced. So that certainly plays a part.
So, you have plans to bring out another book soon, or what do you have going on?
Right now, I'm just finalizing my second book, which will be coming out in next year. I will be looking at, without giving too much, I'll be looking at close encounters. So I'll be looking at abductions and close encounters of the third kind. And it is, when I released the first book, I thought, wow, UFOs are mind-blowing. Now that I finished writing the second book, I can say, wow, alien abductions are mind-blowing as well. And there's so much more to the phenomenon than just aliens existing. It goes on a spiritual and philosophical perspective as well. Like, why are they here? What do they want? How much power do they have? And these are all themes that I will be exploring in my second book. If things go well, it will be coming out next year.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on when that comes out and chat about it.
Certainly.
Well, everybody go out, check out Warren Aguis's book, Evidence of Extraterrestrials, Over 40 Cases Prove Aliens Have Visited. It is available on Amazon and Kindle. And I definitely recommend it. I've read it, and I love, we talked about this before, but I love how it's a scientific approach, and it's kind of a reference book for all the different cases that you have in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you again, Warren, for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
No, it's honestly a pleasure. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, everybody. Y'all stay safe out there. Have a good day. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Unseen Paranormal. Join me next Wednesday with a brand new guest. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. This helps more people discover the show. You can connect with me over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or join us in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group on Facebook. Until next time, remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.
You have come to the end of the line.